On July 8, 2014, Israel launched Operation Protective Edge, an aerial operation in the Gaza Strip in response to rockets fired by Hamas. On July 17th, the ground operation started in order to destroy the tunnels. This is the fourth military intervention in the Gaza Strip in 8 years after Summer Rains, Cast Lead, and Pillar of Defense. To understand the origins of these repeated conflicts, one must first visualize Gaza. Gaza is a narrow strip of land which is 4 to 7 miles wide and 25 miles long, that is 3 times the surface of Paris. To the west of Gaza, the Mediterranean Sea, to the south, Egypt, and to the east and the north, Israel. 1.8 million people live there, which makes Gaza one of the densest territories in the world with more than 11,000 inhabitants by square mile. This population lives in 5 districts, among which Gaza City is the nerve center. 2/3 of Gazans have a refugee status, and a lot of them live in the 8 camps created by the UN since 1948. Gaza is not a state, but one of the 2 regions that make up the Palestinian territories with the West Bank. After being occupied by the Israeli army following the Six-Day War in 1967, these lands have been managed by the Palestinian Authority since the Oslo Accords. 3 administrative divisions were then created: Area A under Palestinian control, Area B under civilian Palestinian control but whose security is jointly enforced with Israel, and Area C under Israeli control, which includes the Jewish settlements. At the time, the Palestinian Authority was in control of the big cities in the West Bank and 2/3 of the Gaza Strip. Then, in 2005, with the dismantling of the 21 Jewish settlements in Gaza and the Israeli military disengagement, the whole of Gaza went under the Palestinian Authority, except for its air and maritime space. That's when Hamas comes into play. In 2006, this Islamist movement, close to the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, won the legislative elections. It prevailed over Fatah, Yasser Arafat's political party, which traditionally represents Palestinian demands. But the polls' results were not recognized by a part of the international community. Why? Because Hamas advocates for complete destruction of the State of Israel, rejects the Oslo Accords, and wants to create a Palestinian Islamic State. Ever since their victory, the Gaza Strip has grown more and more isolated. Isolated diplomatically, as Israel stopped paying customs duties while the US and the EU stopped their financial aids. Isolated politically as well. After violent clashes between Hamas and Fatah, Hamas took over total control of the Gaza Strip in 2007. The geographical division of the Palestinian territory has now become a political and ideological one as well. On one side, the West Bank, controlled by Fatah, the party of the current president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. Abbas is a recognized interlocutor by the international community. On the other side, the Gaza Strip, controlled by Hamas, which refuses to end the armed struggle against Israel. This armed struggle consists of 2 different strategies. First, the firing of rockets, and while the targets were initially in the immediate vicinity of Gaza, the missiles can now go much further. In July 2014, they reached Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa. Of all the rockets fired by Hamas, more than 75% have been allegedly caught by the Iron Dome defense system. Secondly, the tunnels, which have been built so that Hamas combatants can easily reach Israeli territory, and the Jewish state intends to destroy them all. As a consequence of this eruption of violence, all borders with Gaza have been closed. On the Egyptian side, the Rafah border crossing, closed under Mubarak's presidency and reopened in 2011, has yet again been closed after the Egyptian military coup in 2013. The Egyptian army has destroyed the tunnel through which food, building material, and weapons were smuggled. On the Israeli side, the Gaza lockdown is even more severe. On the border, a security barrier along with buffer zones were put in place. Gazans cannot access the buffer zones, even though that's where a lot of fertile agricultural lands are located. Every other border crossing has been closed with the exception of Kerem Shalom for merchandise and Erez for people. Only international organization and medical emergencies personnel can go through them. As for the Gaza International Airport, destroyed in 2011, it has never been rebuilt. Access to borders by boat is also forbidden to Gazans. The fishing area of 20 nautical miles set up by the Oslo Accords has been repeatedly reduced by Israel to 6 or even to 3 miles when tensions were at their highest, even though fish can mostly be found beyond 8 miles according to the UN. The end of this limit has been a major demand of Hamas in the current conflict, as fishing is one of the main sources of income. The isolation of Gaza has made social and economical inequalities grow even higher. The GDP per capita is twice lower than in the West Bank, while the unemployment rate skyrocketed. Stuck in between Israeli bombing and Hamas's refusal to compromise, the Gazan population is imprisoned in the narrow strip.